adding almost any source of water is going to have a positive effect on all the aspects of your urban garden. All right. Functions of a pond. A safe haven for wildlife. Adding a pond or other water feature to your yard is yet another way to attract local wildlife. As more of their natural habitat is taken through urbanization, share with them a piece of your home. Your yard may soon become a favorite watering hole to local birds, as well as attracting beneficial insects, frogs, and other mammals. In some small way, you're doing your part to conserve nature, not unlike a large municipality who adds a park to an urban setting. Second, conserving water. While you may not think of a pond as a way to conserve water, due to the large volume it contains, you might be surprised to learn it can be a great way to reduce your environmental impact. By having a pond in your yard, you're not only reducing the square footage of grass and other plants that need to be watered, but you're also adding a natural holding tank for water and runoff. Carbon sinking and reducing toxic chemicals in groundwater. Let's be honest here. It may not be at the forefront of your thoughts when rehearsing the benefits of having a pond on your property, but chances are you'll be more conscious of toxic chemicals on your property when you have a pond with plants and fish in it. And lastly, a calm environment. There's nothing like sitting on a bench next to a pond with a waterfall, listening to the bubbling water as you take in the beautiful view. We all know that spending time out in nature is cathartic in this busy world in which we live, and bringing a little nature into your yard can make your treks into the wilderness mere steps away. All right, so this is our story. That's me over here with how we moved 5 years ago. We got an unfinished house, and it was backing a unused quarry. Literally what you see on this picture over here with my not impressed look. I was working in corporate. I had no idea what we got ourselves into. Here's one of my twins. And 5 years later, I just took this picture the other day, and it has everything. It has birds and bees and dragonflies. We had a snake that lives in there in the water because we had over 30 degrees almost every day for the last month. If you were similar in BC, it was hot, and we had snakes that just poked its little head out, lizards, chipmunks. I've seen everything you can imagine. A raccoon found our pond, and I looked it up. Supposedly they like defecating in ponds because they're like cats. They like to hide it. So maybe we're unfortunate there. Bears, it's almost too much. Anywho, all right. Building your pond. Step one. Put the pond in a warm, sunny area, and because you'll see tadpoles, dragonflies, and plants thrive in that kind of conditions. Avoid digging a pond under trees that can fill your pond with autumn leaves, or roots that may puncture your pond's lining. You want to mark your pond on the ground with a rope or a hose pipe, and aim to dig it out in the autumn when the ground is soft, so you can fill it up with rainwater and let it settle over winter. Now, we were lucky because we kept noticing this rock mound. We weren't quite sure if we should just cover it with dirt, but my husband ended up digging it out, and it actually had this natural depression full of rock that when all the mud was removed, it just filled up with water, and voila, it's clean all year. It's just wonderful. Anyway, you want to have a maximum depth of at least 60 centimeters. So it's just over 2 feet. This little pond we have in our backyard. Anyways, if you don't have lucky enough to have a little rock depression, building it is how you're going to do it. So you build it bigger than you think. It will fill up quickly after you add mud to the bottom and your water-loving plants start to grow in the water and around the edges. Remove any sharp stones from the bottom of the hole. Put down a 5 centimeter thick layer of sand, carpet, newspapers, anything just to protect the lining from between the dirt. So you want to be able to protect that. All right. Fill the pond with rainwater, or if you have to use a hose, then that's why I do it in the autumn. I did it in the autumn and let it sit for a couple of weeks so that all the sort of, whatever from your town water can dissipate. as the pond fills, place small rocks, boulders, flagstones over the exposed liner on the edges, because you'll see that it starts to wrinkle. So as long as you keep that down, the water will smooth the lining out against the dugout ground there. You want to plant a mix of sedges, rushes, grasses with your plants. Now, I was going to put a list of plants, but depending on where you are, you really want to try to keep them local to your area, because what could be invasive here is something that you're going to find, locally in your area. And another thing, if you do use a butyl liner, it degrades in the sunlight. So try not to leave anything uncovered. Cover it all with rocks. You want to fill the pond up slowly, and perhaps we use mist every time the sunlight sort of evaporates. We just use a mist so it doesn't move too much. You don't want to circulate the water too much underneath there. All right. A mix of long grasses and logs and piles of rocks makes it look quite natural. So you sort of want to think like a pond creature, dense vegetation. And then if it's quite deep in the middle, provide a little ramp so that, like over here, they had a good little demonstration here. This is from the UK hedgehogs, but it's pretty close to what you want to have. There's a little ramp so that if it's too deep, the animals can come out and get out there. You want to have low bush cover for birds. I have lots of logs, but if you don't have any driftwood or anything, I saw this was pretty cute. You put a little terracotta pot upside down, frogs collect in there. The ramp, as we said, we want to have plants for oxygenation, and they included bats. It's wonderful. One thing is we don't have mosquitoes. We do have bats. So I do see some at sunset, and between the dragonflies and the bats and the fish, we don't have mosquitoes in our pond. And that's usually one of the first questions that when people come to visit, they see that. Where are we here? Yeah, you want to have lots of different types of plants. We're going to get into that here. So choosing your plants. There are 4 zones in which pond plants may be grown. Try to have plants in each zone. You have the totally submerged zone. The photosynthesizing leaves are underwater. The oxygen they produce remains dissolved in your pond. And that's part of the whole carbon sinking. It's pretty cool. Submerged but floating. So those are called your floating, but with floating leaves. Some of these are rooted in the mud, but others float freely. These plants shade the deeper parts of the pond and control the growth of algae. And then you have your emergent. Those are the ones in shallow water. They grow with their roots anchored in the mud, but their stems and leaves will often be standing out of the water. They soften the edges of the backyard pond and provide a transition from the water to the land and make it a bit more natural looking. And then your marginal are just growing around the pond edges. Right. Sorry, I should have been going there. Now, the health of your pond. Let's go through some health tips. Never catch frogs or toads or relocate them. Surprisingly, they can travel for miles or to find water sources. So you will eventually be attracting them. Never remove them. Allow grasses and plants to trail over the edge of the pond to provide habitat for small invertebrates, amphibians, and even reptiles, like I said, with the garter snakes going in our pond during the hot summer days. If your pond experiences an algal bloom, provide more shade in the form of even taller plants. So I did add some taller grasses. It was starting to look a bit green in the middle of the summer. I added some taller grasses and I got another piece of driftwood, and instantly the water turned clean again. It's pretty amazing. But if you do get it, scoop it out and use it to fertilize your garden. I just put it on my compost pile. One of the best ways to keep your pond clean is to have flowing water in the form of a solar pump, fountain, or waterfall. Moving water provides oxygen, which helps prevent the buildup of toxic gases created from decaying plants and fish waste. All right, did you know So this is actually our backyard pond. In the beginning days, now we have a lot more of the piles of driftwood, but yeah, we were pretty happy with it. We sit there a lot and just enjoy the sunset, as you can see, and our little we have dragonflies that come right up into our face, and it's really nice. Yeah. And thank you.
Looks really gorgeous. Yeah, and actually adding the logs not only adds shade. The other interesting thing, and I learned this a while back from somebody who was doing natural ponds in some places in the Midwest where they were converting rainwater harvesting, like rainwater sort of catchment ponds from areas with flooding that they were in. They were converting them from being surrounded by lawn to being actual ecosystem spaces. And they would add wood and logs and that to the ponds, not just for habitat, but because the decomposition of carbon-rich material, so wood, that process soaks up a lot of the excess nitrogen from the water. Okay. And it helps really control algae blooms.
Okay.
In ponds. So adding wood to your pond is actually a good idea. It is something that not everybody would tend to jump to and think of, but it actually is one of the tools for managing. So
it's instinctual then. Because it makes it look. I think I have another picture. Did I put that one? Oh, this is sorry, it wasn't a very clear one. But yeah, it just is growing. We've got lots of little woods, driftwood, and then we have some as the ramp. And now that's covered a lot more with the grasses, and but that's not the best picture. But you could see the rocky outcrop I was talking about here, this rock that was filled with mud. And then the rings here is where when it evaporates, we know, we got to fill it up again. We just put it on mist. But that happened a lot this summer. But normally we don't have to do much. It's pretty cool. There's some resources, but yeah. Any questions?
So yeah, I'm going to do, actually, would you please show the 2 slides before your healthy pond slide?
Of course.
So if you go back through.
Sorry.
Yes, so I think
pretty new at all this, people.
Maybe go ahead again a few. It was the marginal ones. So yes. So
okay.
Back one maybe.
Was it this?
There. So submerged. So yeah, those are the ones.
I skipped through that quickly.
Yeah, that's fine. So that was the plants that actually hold their leaves under the water, and then you can get the ones that float freely on the surface. And that can be like the water lettuces, and that people often add them every year. And then the water lilies. Yeah. And then your next slide was.
We've got there was the marsh, like a marsh marigold. They have a BC one, they have an Ontario one. That's for the marginal. I can't remember some good, but emergent. Think of, like, as I said down here, what the Brits would say, the bog plants. They're sort of, I have some sedges, actually. That's where I have my carrots, but they're, if it's a big rainfall, we have some lower areas of the rock that will fill up, and then they might be submerged in the water, but only for a week or two. So that's where you kind of are the ones that, like the bog plants, you want to think of.
Yeah, and I tend to call that seasonally flooded. So it's not wet all the time, but there's plants that are really well adapted to that, and they're not happy if they're not occasionally underwater, but they're okay with being not being in the water all the time. There's always somebody for every niche. Somebody did ask a question. I love the idea of a natural pond without a pump. Is that feasible in a small backyard? And they said, I missed it if you spoke about pumps.
Okay, we don't have a pump. We don't have anything, and it's pretty amazing. It will freeze So we don't even do a heater. A lot of people recommend that, especially if you have goldfish. We put a couple of goldfish in just to help with mosquitoes because we're in a very agricultural area. There's lots of mosquitoes. So we do put we have a couple of goldfish. The water will freeze almost to the bottom. And then we have lots of underground growth in there. So they hide in there. It doesn't freeze fully. Sometimes it's amazing. The fish will freeze in the ice. They will be frozen. It thaws next spring and they're still alive. Anyways, your question was the pump. Yeah, we never used it. We have a little cute little solar waterfall just for the sound. It's just a little, and it just comes in, but we've never had to use a pump. You don't need to clean it. It should become a balanced natural ecosystem where the water is crystal clear. I was trying to figure out how to put a video so I could show you, but I'm not that techie, but
Yeah,
it is crystal clear water. Oh,
yeah. Sometimes
okay, this is how funny we are. One more story. Sorry, everyone.
Yeah.
I bought from MEC. I bought a water filter because I'm trying to teach the kids. They turned 10. I want to do survival. So we actually filtered the clean pond water. Yep. So it's good.
That's what those are for.
Those ones,
they're biological filters. Yep. You're able to drink the water from the pond.
We're goofs anyway.
Yeah. I can also say that I've seen a couple of interesting things done for people who are working in like really small urban spaces. Since somebody's saying they have a small backyard, I've seen water gardens done in pots without circulation. But you do need to do something like add a couple of small goldfish, and then you have the question of what do you do with those goldfish in the winter, because you do not release them into the wild. They're becoming
right. Thank you. Yeah. That's number one. Don't take anything. Don't release it. This is an enclosed. This is, other than the dragonflies, insects, and everything else. What's in there? Yeah, and definitely no yellow flags or anything.
Yes.
I did forever have a beautiful pot that I kept guppies in, and I kept little duckweed at the top. So cute, nothing else. But yeah, you do need it to get the algae, and you could part the duckweed, which definitely don't put out in nature. You could part it, and they multiplied like crazy. I mean, there was hundreds. I left it out, and they froze in the garage. I thought that'd be safe, but yeah.
Yeah, no, it can be tricky to keep containers over the winter, whether it's fish or anything else.
And the garage, we get cold. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm in Ottawa, so I get that.
Yeah, so I don't do it anymore. I learned my lesson. Yeah. It was one bad winter. Yeah.
Yeah. So you can create balance by having all in a pond that is not being actively circulated, by having all of the life forms present. But that means that you need to have you need to have enough volume that the animals can complete their full life cycles and have winter and everything. If you don't need that, that's when you do need some sort of mechanical circulation. So if you have a really small backyard, sometimes it's actually more feasible to go, I can't get in all of the layers of life forms that are needed to support a full ecosystem,
like a 2 foot deep
function.
Yeah.
Within this limited space that I'm working with. So that's when you can add something like a little solar pump or that, just to keep that circulating, and it will still then serve all of the purposes of supporting all the wildlife and bringing everybody to it and providing a water source for the pollinators and the birds and doing all those awesome things. But sometimes, we have to adapt a little bit. And in those tight urban settings where we can't rely on complete ecosystems, we have to fill in some of the gaps.
I tell everyone I know, because we started before this pond, we started just with a bird bath, and everything goes in there. So just start with your bird bath and just keep it filled, and you will see at least you get the birds, and you'll see little bees coming to the sides. I mean, whatever we can do to help the bees, but you could start with a bird bath. Any bit of water, saucers. I keep actually, like if I broke a pot or something, I keep the saucer filled with water all around my yard. I've seen chipmunks, I've seen birds, and of course all the little insects. A saucer. You just need some water. It's just, those 4 things you sort of need: the habitat, the food source, You know, if it's or like a larvae source for caterpillars, and then water and
Mhm.
safety. Yeah. So
Yes.
I have an indoor cat.
Yes.
Of course.
Yeah, and actually,
That's a whole nother subject, indoor cats for
yes,
everyone.
keep the cats inside. Our
Mhm.
ecosystems can't quite manage and can't quite handle that much predation.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the saucers, I know in a lot of cases, people recommend putting some stones in them so that it gives you variations in sort of water depths and that. Although I found in a really urban setting, I had to take the rocks away because there's a mama raccoon that likes to bring all the baby raccoons around to the yard, which is fine. And they do a bit of damage later in the season once they get to be sort of the teenage stage and they start wrestling. But I found with the saucer full of rocks was from the baby raccoon's standpoint, the best toy ever. But
Okay.
boy, is that
Good.
noisy at 2 a.m.
Oh.
Going out there and taking the rocks out of the saucer, going, look, you can play in the water, but you're not allowed to.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. That's good point.
They're all, and that's just a matter of every site you have your own little learning curve and
Yeah.
adaptations because every place has those sorts of
Yeah. Yeah. I guess, I just thought of something I didn't point out, and it's children. So we moved here and they were 5. Yeah, because but we've had little kids walk straight in. And so yeah, that's why you don't want to go too big either. Like, yeah, just be aware. Yeah, yeah. um,
Well,
yeah.
that's where the slope
We had a
sides are
beautiful toad
also.
once. We had a beautiful toad, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
The same kid had a stick and we found it in the toad later.
Yeah.
He's banned.
Yes. Kids find these things that, yes, they poke at things to experiment. But
Yeah.
yeah, from a safety standpoint, actually, that's also where the slope sides, because sometimes people are like, well, how do we keep the kids out of the water? And I'm like, or just accept the kids will be in the water, and it's a
Yeah.
wonderful learning process. And there's
Yeah.
so much and there's the physical stimulation, all the sensory stuff in play, and the
Yeah.
fascination. And if you children are going to be fascinated with something, it's much better a pond than a stream.
Yeah.
um
Yeah,
and
a screen. Yes, I thought you said a stream. I'm like, well,
oh,
that's
streams
pretty
are good
cool.
too. Yeah.
Streams, I love stream. But yeah, I mean, and the kids have really enjoyed it from then. The first thing, if they have new friends come over, come see the pond. It's not even just it's just everything around it. Yeah, we every night will sit and have a cup of tea and we sit and we stare at a pond. I mean, it does have a nice reflection from the mountain, but literally we stare at a pond every
Yep.
night.
That's
It's funny.
entertainment.
Water is, we're made of water. It's in us. It's
Yeah.
important.
Yeah, and that's and if you've got sloped sides, and even if your whole pond isn't sloped, but when I used to do design work, I'd actually talk about having a gravel beach approach, at least on one side of the pond, because that will encourage, if somebody's going to, a small person who's going to go running in, they're going to go at the slope more than
That's
go off an
brilliant.
edge, and then they're going to be able to get back out on that slope. So it's actually, a pond is safer than a pool, because if you put they're shallower and they have slope sides, and you can get that lovely sense of water, and you have all that life, and
And a little
yeah.
beach. I mean, that sounds,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I'm thinking about maybe where we could add a little bit more sand. Okay.
Well, sand or sort of fine gravel too, because then
Fine
you don't have to
gravel.
worry about getting stirred up or caught in anything. Mind you, if you don't have a
Right.
pump system, sand is actually more of an option. Okay, I think we've got another question here. Yeah, do you have any advice on how to construct container water gardens? Example, what plants to include, what kinds of containers to use, how deep or wide to make it?
Okay. Yeah. So I've been seeing, mine was a beautiful, like it was gorgeous pot. It was like a Chinese style. And then we put my husband sort of puttied up and caulked off the drain hole because it was probably for a plant pot. And then we just topped up the water. Honestly, if you have fish in there, you don't have to worry about anything else. But we had duckweed. If you want to get anything like any of those beautiful help here.
love that feeling
like
of there's a word.
lotus
Yeah.
flowers or things
Yeah,
like
and the
that.
water lilies.
Water lilies. Um,
You can get
I
some
like
green.
grasses. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
I like grasses. So then I've been seeing the trough, the
Mhm.
metal trough. I love that look. I think that looks good. I'm thinking about doing that. Again, I don't think the pond needs the pump as much as if you have all the parts. You have all the working
Mhm.
parts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, you just have to sort of think about who's going to eat the mosquito larva. And as long as there's somebody there to eat the mosquito larva, you're good. And if you don't have, if you're not introducing anyone to the pond that will eat the mosquito larva, that's when, yeah, a little circulating pump of some sort will then create enough disruption that it's not very appealing to mosquito larvae, to mosquitoes. They don't like to lay their eggs in moving water.
Yeah.
Um,
Those little snails too, again, don't release them, but you know, you can get them from aquariums. You can even, I do buy a lot of my plants from aquariums. There's like a good one, I think, based in Ontario, it's called the Pond Expert. And
yeah, there's a few
yeah,
pond
yeah,
specialist
they have a
companies,
big selection of plants.
and it's getting easier. It's not, you still want to double check because Ontario has very poor invasive species laws, so you can still unfortunately go and buy invasive species from pond suppliers, not knowing that they're invasive species.
Oh gosh,
But you
okay.
can also, if you and you want to look by your province and by your area, but there's getting to be more and more availability of native ponds water species, certainly. So if you start off with a little bit of a list of, okay, these are the okay ones, or you just double check and look them up before you bring a plant home.
That's
It is
good.
getting easier than it was a few years ago to check both those things, to find native species for your ponds and your water your gardens, and to double check to make sure that you're not accidentally ending up with an invasive species. And the other thing about those small ponds is there's been a lot of selection lately, even for small, like small water lilies. So you can actually, even in like a trough or a large pot, you can actually have like a water lily with the beautiful water lily blooms, because they're very small varieties.
I'm gonna look for some. Yeah, that's one thing we sort of gave up because every year I was buying new ones because they're annuals and because you know it'll be covered in snow. So we just sort of gave up on the more like the surface floating ones, just because the plants that are in there, the submerged ones, are thick. And actually, we have to pull them out, put them in the compost pile because they you know, so they're it's just sort of the least I do, the better it runs. I find, you know, the more I try to fix it, yeah,
Mhm.
it's better just let it. The fish is the most important thing for the mosquito. So if you have them,
And as far as size, from my understanding, for pots and that, you want at least sort of 18 inches. I know my brain likes to work in imperial symmetric, sort of a 50 centimeter wide and deep. If you can go to sort of 24 inches or 60, 70 centimeters wide and deep, that's even better, as far as your sort of minimum sizes. And if you are planting plants into them, you can either have them in, and they usually come in these sort of pots that are all these like perforated sides that you can just set right in, or you can take them out of containers and then you'd actually spread like a gravel layer and sort of spread the roots out under the gravel for sort of those little potted water
that's
gardens.
what we did. Yeah, we started with that with mud, and then another one that we do is we just had like it's I think it's like an arrowhead,
Mm-hmm,
and we put a metal like a bit of chicken wire and sort of
mm-hmm,
just tuck that with the rocks, and that
yeah,
sort of kept a bit of the soil and a bit of the root ball. Yeah.
mm-hmm,
And
yeah,
you don't
and
see the metal. Yeah. Sorry.
yeah. And actually, water garden plants are one of the ones where you don't want them to have potting soil, because potting soil is made out of organic matter, much of which floats.
Floats. Yeah.
So if you get something that comes in a pot that has like a peat mossy sort of base to it, wash those roots off. You can actually pack soil, like real garden soil that has clay and sand and silt and that in around roots, and that's sort of the mud that you would find, and put that in with, and then cover it with the gravel. But yeah, if you're transferring something from that has been grown in potting soil into a water environment, you want to wash off any peat moss on it, because that will float and you don't
And
want
just make
that
it
in
dirty.
water.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Make it
and
dirtier.
yeah, perlite. And if they've been grown as water garden plants, that's not an issue. They won't have that with them, but there are some species that will grow in either, and sometimes it's easier to or cheaper to find growing as just garden center plants and then wash them off. Because even things like canna lilies can actually grow in wet settings. Canna lilies,
Any tropical, the
yeah,
elephant ear ones,
yeah.
beautiful. The only thing is, again, I like to keep things cheap. So anything that's going to die off, yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I totally get that. But yeah,
But they're
it's
so gorgeous. Yeah, that's a different look. I was trying to do more of like a prairie grassy, but
mhm.
I mean, I love that tropical look with the big leaves and any
Yeah,
day.
there's
I
so
love
much.
that.
Yep, and
Canada.
if you're working in a pot that you're going to have to do the extra care with anyway, and drain them in the winter and that.
Yeah.
If you happen to be lucky enough, yeah, and I'm sort of I'm talking sort of as much to the audience here, but to have a root celery space that somewhere that's cool but not freezing. A lot of those tropical water plants, you can sort of let them die back a bit in the fall, cut them off, take them out, just wrap them in like a plastic bag, the roots in like a plastic bag with some sawdust, or even if you feel like carrying it around, white gravel, and actually store them in like a root celery setting for the winter, and then pull them back out in the spring. Or if you happen to have access to a deep water garden somewhere, you can actually take the pots that they're in, like any grow pot that they're in inside your water garden pot, and sink them down, and then fish to the depth where they're protected from the freezing, and then in the spring
Oh,
fish them back out, and put them back into the pots. So though there are some ways to
that's
keep them
smart.
over, but you need sort of a cold but not frozen spot to do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, I know. I'm gonna try that again. That's smart. I didn't think about putting them down at the very bottom. Ah,
You can do that if you've got some spots. If you do have a spot in the pond that doesn't freeze, you can take the plants sort of from shallower spots, as long as they're in some sort of a movable container, and move them right over to the deepest spot
part
for wintering.
and bring them up. That's
Yeah,
great.
because I know some people who've managed to grow some really, like, can't freeze solid, the more tropical water lilies, but even here in Ottawa, because they move them into the really deep spot in the pond where the fish in that winter over, and so they're cold, but they're not frozen. Makes a big
Okay,
difference.
that's great.
Do we have any more questions from the audience, from today's participants? Anything else about water for water gardens or pots, or for bringing wildlife into the space? So sometimes you have to manage the wildlife that comes into the space in various ways, but it is great to just see everyone who shows up, and suddenly your space is for everyone, and you get to meet all of your non-human neighbors when you've got the water in the neighborhood.
It's true. Yeah, you're like the most popular one for sure.
Yeah.
That's how I feel.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, just so much life, and especially this the way our climate is. Those pockets of water are kind of going to be a lifesaver in some cases. I swear, especially right before the birds molt in like August, but July, the amount of birds around sunset taking baths. That was again one of the videos I was trying to figure out. I'll do this again with the videos, but I mean, they're fighting for space to on the lower part to get the bath and rinse off from that 36-degree weather that and and the dryness. I mean, yeah, it's lovely. It's lovely to see everything. The raccoons, I'm gonna have to think about. I mean, yeah,
Um,
you gotta look after them, but
so I know you're on Instagram, right? Your yoga garden. Do
yeah,
you post those videos there?
I do. I would love
So,
everyone to follow me. I have all my little, I'm just, yeah, just a bit obsessed with my garden. Um, Now, I usually warn people, okay, it's just garden. Like, it's just
oh,
everything that goes in there and all the animals. Yeah, there'll be all the birds and yeah. I'm at
yep.
Yogagardens,
Yo garden.
at Yogardens. Yeah. I think I called it that because I like to just stretch while I water the yard. And then my husband's like, "You're doing yoga," and then and then I don't know, it came together.
Perfect
Anyway,
spot to do yoga.
I do. The neighbors see me, and I'm like, I do this. Yeah, I sometimes
Um,
stare too. As a designer, you probably feel that way. We just stare at something, and then people look back. The neighbors walk by. Are you okay? Are you okay, Fina? Oh yeah, just rearranging it in my head.
yeah.
Anyway.
My computer's not being cooperative at the moment. Could you toss your Instagram handle in the chat?
Sure. It's just here on the bottom of the
Oh, it
page,
is at Yo
actually.
Gardens. Okay,
It is
I was
at
trying to
your,
type that into Instagram, and for some reason my page wasn't loading, but that was just my computer giving me a tough time. But yeah, so if anyone wants to see all those pictures,
I'm
and
there.
I've looked through your Instagram, and yeah, there's some really awesome pictures there, and yeah, I've seen some of those videos that you're talking about, and you had the one
Yeah.
with the robin that flew by and
Oh,
was
you saw, that's the video I was trying to. The dragonfly came and then the robin just missed it. I was there for hours trying to get
yeah.
something. Yeah, it was cool.
Yeah, no, it is really awesome when you start to sort of actively work to invite in all the wildlife. My husband was sitting on porch at our little cottagey place, which doesn't have water yet, the other day, but there was a Canada goldenrod. So like the goldenrod everyone loves to hate because they're so enthusiastic and they spread so much. And there was a patch that had self-seeded there in the spring. I cut it down and so that it wouldn't be so tall because it always falls over on the porch. But this year I was like, okay, I'm gonna cut that off. And so it grew up, and it was blooming a little bit later than the other Canada goldenrod. So so a little bit of offset bloom time. So everybody was feeding on that one. And my husband commented the other day, he's like, it's really neat watching the bees and the wasps on the goldenrod. And I'm like, such a perfect little encapsulation. It's like bees, wasps, goldenrod, that things that people are not quite, but it's just so fascinating when you can be close to them and watch them, and you can actually watch their interactions. And it's just so engaging when you can be close to it. And there's not much that will bring more to your space than water. Well,
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. The other day I was taking, I don't know if you saw it, but I was doing all my pollinators, little video reel, and it was kind of funny. I was laughing because the bees were talking to me. Anytime I went close, and probably people have heard this, but about, they would buzz, zip
mhm.
around me, stare, and then buzz back to the plant, quite teed off. I was in their way, and then literally would go bzzz, and then back. And I've seen the dragonfly come in and be picking off a mosquito. Like, you're so comfortable with me now. I'll just stay there, and it'll be like, zoop, zoop. I'm like, oh, you just feel joy.
Yep. And I always figured the dragonflies think we make really good bait for all of the mosquitoes. So they hang
That's what I
around.
was thinking. That's it. I'm like, okay, here I am. Come, my little friends. And sometimes the husband, there's a mosquito around. What's going on,
Where's the
buddies? Where did you guys go?
Yeah, no, we always look forward to the emergence of the dragonflies out at our place because the mosquito and the blackfly populations just plummet at exactly the same time. And I'm like, because they
It's
all got
cool.
eaten. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. It's just, like, oh, it's like what John Muir. I went into the woods and I went outside, but really I came in. I mean, you just see the interconnection, we're all that was a terrible quote. Sorry, I missed it up. But we're, instead of, oh, there's nature. I mean, this is it. We're all a part of it, and you don't get to see it unless you get outside and plant something and put some water in. Yeah.
Yep, start tending that relationship again. All right, so I'm not seeing any more questions in the chat, and we're coming right up to the 3:45, which is generally when we wrap up. I went and said I was going to record, and then I didn't hit record until like your second slide, but I think all of the really great content I think we just left off my introduction at the front, which wasn't that important anyway. So yes, thank you very much for your talk today and our chat. And it really does make a difference. Yeah, it's the more people that engage with this, the more impact we can all make. And as I said, I did record this session, most of it. So we will be posting onto the Soul website, and as long as that's okay with you, Sarah. But we do send the link out to everyone who registered, so that if they couldn't attend live, they can still see it. Yeah, please share everybody about this series to your networks and let people know that they can find all this great information. And next week we are going to have a guest on speaking specifically about bees. So the topic next week is all going to be all about bees, and the sign up link for that will go out in the email as well. So thanks everybody for joining, and I see there's a few thank yous in the chat for you,
Thanks,
Sarah.
everyone.
All right, thanks.
Thanks, Sandara. Bye.
Bye.